Let's talk about memory processes, because if you've ever forgotten something, there are 3 stages in the memory process where you could have forgotten them, or 3 reasons why, if you think about it. So oftentimes when I have my keys, I'm always losing my keys. I put them down, and the reason why I can't remember where I put them is I never really paid attention to where I put them down. I just tossed them on the coffee table. I wasn't paying attention. We call that first stage of the memory process encoding. This is where you actually form the memories. And encoding is critical because if you don't pay attention to what you're doing or don't pay attention to what you're reading, you're not going to remember it because you never noticed it in the first place. And this is the issue with encoding. So oftentimes if somebody forgets something, the very simplest reason is they never noticed it in the first place. They never even made an intention to try and remember it. There was never really any chance. And this happens to me with my keys, right? I just tossed them down, I didn't pay attention to where I put them, and of course I can't remember them. So that's the encoding stage. But then there's the storage stage where you try and put them and find an organization where that memory will be put into a spot where you're going to find it again. It's a little bit like putting something away in storage in our house, right? You like to organize it and find a nice little organization so you'll be able to find it again. And we call this the storage stage, where you're actually trying to find organization to put things away, some sort of unique mnemonic device or memory thing. And this is what, when people are studying for tests, you really need to pay attention to, because if you can find that great organization, it's going to make it that much easier to pull it out again. So you have to find an organization to store things away. So when you're confronted with new information, you have to figure out, oh, what is exactly about this new information? How does that fit in with all the other things that I've learned? And where can I put that away in my unique memory organization system? So that second stage is storage. And if you don't have that organization, sometimes you'll forget something, not because you didn't notice it, but because you didn't really have the right organization system in your mind to remember it in the first place. And then the last stage of the memory process is all about retrieval, bringing it back from that long-term memory. And that is a real issue, because if you've ever been in a test and sat there and think, oh my goodness, I can't remember this, you're having problems with retrieval. And it's not the case that you didn't know it, you didn't encode it, or you didn't have it stored away. You just can't remember it in that moment. You can't retrieve it. And retrieval is very frustrating, of course, because 10 minutes after the test is over, you're like, oh yeah, that's right, now I remember it, right? Or that person you meet and you can't remember their name, and 5 minutes after they left, you're like, oh yeah, that's right, now I remember who it is. So that retrieval stage. So those 3 processes, encoding, storage, and retrieval, are absolutely critical if you're going to remember something. Next, I want to talk about the information flow in memory. Because when you're remembering something, there are different components to the memory system that these processes have to go through. So encoding, storage, and retrieval have to go through all the different parts of the memory system if you're going to remember something. So sensory memory is basically our attentional memory. It's what we're paying attention to. It's that raw sensory input coming in from everywhere that we're paying attention to. It's relatively large. It holds lots of things. And we actually have this sort of iconic memory or auditory memory, echoic memory, that can help us remember something for just a brief second after it's gone by. If you've ever misheard somebody and been like, wait, what was that you said? And then you kind of play it back in your ear, you're taking advantage of that echoic memory. Or if you've just seen something and it flashed by and like, wait, what was that? You can kind of process it through. That's taking advantage of sensory memory. But of course, the real memory, the one that we think of when we think of memory, is something we call short-term memory. Short-term memory is short. It processes and holds information for several seconds, and primary and working memory are other names for short-term memory. And short-term memory is critical to that encoding process because it's in short-term memory that we find the organization we need to put things away in the final stage of memory, which is long-term memory. So short-term memory is all about that mental scratch pad to try and find some kind of unique organization so you can store things away in long-term memory and then eventually retrieve them back when you're done. So those are those 3 different components of memory, and that's important for encoding, storage, and retrieval, because sensory memory is the encoding stage. That's what you're paying attention to. But getting things and finding its storage and storing it away, that's short-term memory. And then when you have to pull it back from long-term memory, that's retrieval. So you see how the different stages of memory and the different parts of the memory system work together to help us remember things. There's one last thing I want you to know, though. The executive control processes, sometimes known as metacognition, They're involved in planning and monitoring what you're going to remember and what you might need to pay more attention to. And we're going to see in a little bit that kids, of course, are terrible at metacognition. They don't know what they're likely to forget, and as a result, they don't necessarily study it. Hopefully, you all are much smarter about your metacognition than kids.